Mobile Suit Gundam Iron-Blooded Orphans second season is kind of interesting in that it managed to fix the bulk of my issues with season 1. For one thing, one of the major issues I had, of course, was that all of the characters under Tekketen were basically the same character, and so this season takes the opportunity to introduce new characters and to sort of stick with them, explore them a little bit more, and help flesh them out a bit. Get you to actually care about them before killing them. Put a pin in that. I also thought the intrigue plot from season 1 was terrible because it was just McGill's it up, but now that McGill's has a position of power inside the Gallarhorn Company, what we actually get to see is his sort of intellectual sparring with other members of Gallarhorn, diving into the intrigue plot that was sort of teased in season 1 and actually delivering on it, actually giving us the internal politics that I was craving back in the first season. Not only that, we also get to see a bit of interplay and political intrigue coming from the Teiwaz, which was the criminal organization that Tekketen joined. We get to see how they're going and a sort of internal struggle against Tekkenen's recent rise due to their last mission they had accomplished, and also a bit of a succession war between them, and also McGill's succession war in Gallarhorn. And although Mikazuki is still basically an unstoppable monster, in fact, they go out of the way to call him a demon in this, the major issue with him was that he was just completely unstoppable and just won because. Whereas he still kind of does that in this, but they managed to make it less egregious because the Elevenlayana system, or however you're supposed to say it, starts like fucking with his body. So for like a good, I'd say, fourth of the entire show, he's basically immobile when he's not inside the Gundam, just because like the right side of his body is completely paralyzed. So he's still unstoppable in an actual fight, but he ends up getting like taken down a few pegs as an actual like person. And speaking of him as an actual person, the show does develop on something that was set up in the first season. I'm not going to say it wasn't, but it starts to expand and explore his more developing, more human personalities, especially when it comes to the one girl he gets pregnant who has a name that I don't care about. I wouldn't necessarily say the fights get more interesting, although there is a moment where they waken up one of the ancient weapons from the Calamity War called a mobile armor, I think. And first off, the build up to the mobile armor awakening is fucking hype as shit. And honestly, the fight itself is pretty cool. Like, they really managed to build this thing up as an actual threat. And so when they actually take it down and you get to see it like shred all of the other like mobile suits, when they actually take it down, it becomes that much cooler, which I guess also fixes one of the other problems I had in season 1, which is the severe lack of tension in any of the combats. And whereas season 1, Tekketen was largely just completely shrouded in plot armor. That is what it was. In season 1, they had so much fucking plot armor ripped completely away from him than this. People die all the fucking time, and most of the time, it feels earned. Sometimes it's a little abrasive. I can't help but note that one of the characters died literally the second her subplot wrapped up and is just gunned down in a store, but at the very least, they use that as a jumping off point to go into another plot line and help develop another undercooked character from season 1. So honestly, that itself is pretty forgivable also. If anyone has plot armor in this season, it's the goddamn villains. There is one guy who I will say I love that his death was... I love that he's just crushed to death. I think that's kind of the perfect ending for him. But yeah, he should have died like way earlier, just logically. He should have died like 5 times, and which is kind of weird because they don't do a great job of exploring the villains, and so it's not necessary. They could theoretically kill as many as they wanted, and the fact that Gallarhorn is, from the very get-go, portrayed as being basically unstoppable and such a huge military force, I don't really think they needed to keep it going, keep protecting them. Like, they kind of bend over backward to protect some of the Gallarhorn characters, but I will say that at the very least, in the last half episode at the end, they do manage to take the characters that had been protected by plot armor to that point, and they sort of wrapped up their own character arcs, and it does feel like a just desserts kind of thing. I'm sure it's probably pretty controversial, but I'm totally okay with McGill's getting gunned down by who he got gunned down by, and I do like that he ended up in the relationship with the woman who basically hated him at the beginning, but then they ended up kind of together at the end, and also they kind of built her up as taking over the throne of like Gallarhorn after the current guy goes away. I will say the way Tekkadan goes down is kind of unsatisfying, and honestly, it's kind of poorly written in that regard, because so in tragedies, there's a concept of Hermersha. It is the fatal flaw that leads to your undoing. And basically all of Tekkadan has the same personality except for some season 2 characters. So it really just comes down to what are Orga's fatal flaws. And he actually had quite a few of them. Number one, he was a terrible military commander whose only plan was to charge directly forward into a suicidal rampage. Number two, he never learned how to play the politics game. He was constantly getting outmaneuvered. And number three, he was incredibly impulsive, never really planned any things out, and was very quick to respond to situations with violence. And not only do they show these flaws in season 1, they really build them up as his fatal flaws in season 2. So when Tekkadan gets blown the fuck away by Gallarhorn at the end, spoilers I guess, you would assume that this is caused by one of Orga's main flaws. But the fact is, no, the reason that Tekkadan ends up going is because they sided with McGill's and Teiwaz. Like, they hitched their horse on the wrong wagon right at the start. Like season 1, episode 2, and that's what killed them. And so it's kind of unsatisfying how they go out. I think as far as like a tragedy could be handled better. I felt satisfied enough with the way everyone's character arcs wrapped up, and I guess it was kind of a happy ending at the end. It does feel a little cheap that everyone basically got what they wanted, but Gallarhorn remained in power, just because we don't really explore the new leader of Gallarhorn, so it's not really clear. I guess if we knew his motivations from the beginning, we would have known that the entire show was pointless. But it does seem like Tekkadan and McGill's plans were basically just there to serve as a catalyst for something that would have happened. Like, it's basically to get the guy who's in charge of Gallarhorn on Gallarhorn in the first place. And I guess you could argue that getting Cordelia to Earth and allowing her to negotiate and deal with the labor unions of Mars put her in her positions of power. So basically, it's a show where everyone was fucked from the beginning and they all died, so that the two people that needed to be sitting in the throne ended up sitting on the proper thrones. It's kind of weird and unsatisfying, but I don't hate the ending, and by and large, I will say that season 2 was a more enjoyable experience than season 1. Twitch and Discord in the description. I've been Sacrobolic, your envoy of hope. Bye-bye.